Hi, everyone. I'm Arsh, and I work at MetalBear. We are building a Kubernetes dev tool. This talk is not about the tool we are building, but this talk is about how I got started in the Kubernetes ecosystem. But I have a bunch of memes in my talk, and I want to see how many of you would understand those memes. So before I start, can I have a show of hands about people who have learned data structures and algorithms in university or during job hunting? OK, a lot of you, as expected. And people who have done lead code questions when trying to apply to companies? OK. And people who have liked this process, can you please raise their hands? OK, one person, yeah. Two people, that's expected. OK, so I know you're going to like this because this is about hating on data structures and algorithms, which I'm a huge hater of. So the idea of this talk started when I had a friend who was applying for jobs recently, and he just told me how frustrating the process is because he's doing all these data structure problems every day, and then he asks and answers them in the interview, but when he actually gets the job, he has no use of it. And I totally related with that because when I started college, I was told of this term called DSA, which is short for data structures and algorithms, also known as stuff which you learn to get a job in FANG. And I just hated the process. I never bothered learning it because I did not like just grinding and climbing up a ladder. And you could not do you couldn't actually do anything with it. You could not build an application or anything if you just know how to invert a binary tree, which is why I felt this was pretty useless. I'm using a lot of strong words, but when I got fed up with all of this, I somehow found open source, and I found out about Linux Foundation's mentorship program. And I signed up for this project, which was about developing tools to evaluate dependency updates for Kubernetes. When I signed up for this, I had no idea what Kubernetes is, what dependencies are, or what any of this is. But I applied, and luckily, I got selected. And when I started building this, I learned about this command called go-mod-graph, which a lot of Go developers would know about. And this command shows you an output, which is something like this. So you see one project, and then on the right is the dependency of that project. Now, any wise person would see this output, and they would immediately be like, OK, yeah, you need a graph to store this. I was not wise, and I should have paid more attention in class, which I didn't. But this eventually made me realize that I do need to learn data structures and algorithms, which is when I started learning them. And I'll admit, this time I enjoyed the process because I knew I was going to use them. I was learning them to build something, and it was a lot more interesting when I had a purpose behind it. So with that in mind, we ended up using something called a directed acyclic graph, which basically is 1 being your main project, and then 2 and 3 being your dependencies. So you basically store all your dependencies in a graph. So if your project A depends on B and C, then you store that in a graph. And then each node of B and C shows stuff which B and C further depend on. So you make a graph of all your project dependencies like this. And when you have the graph, you count the number of direct dependencies and transitive dependencies your project has. So direct dependencies are stuff which your project directly depends upon, and transitive dependencies are dependencies of dependencies. You'll notice I'm speaking faster because we only have a minute left, but we ended up using this tool as a CI job in the Kubernetes project. So if you make a pull request to Kubernetes right now, you would see that it shows you how much your pull request is impacting the dependencies, if they are increasing or decreasing, which is very valuable information as maintainers because it shows us the impact your pull request is having on the overall project, and we don't want the dependencies to increase exceptionally. This is one of my favorite tweets. I have this framed in a wall on my room because this was the first time someone actually used software I built. And this is them showing the output of how they made a pull request to Kubernetes and saw the number of dependencies change. So this was my full circle moment. When I saw this tweet, I was like, OK, yes, the stuff they do teach in university might end up being useful. And this is where my love-hate relationship with data structures and algorithms turned to a love-respect relationship. But One last thing I want to leave you with is the tool we built had a command to visualize all of the dependencies of a project, and we ran that command for Kubernetes, and it was a beautiful image which still haunts me, and that is the final image I shall leave you all with. This is a dependency graph of all the dependencies in the Kubernetes project. That was my talk. If you want to connect with me on socials, you can go to my website. If you want to try the tool, that's the link. If you want to talk to me or get one of these cool sleeping hats, you can find me at booth 1560. Thank you for attending.